Good morning and welcome to Onward in Love and Caregiving. I'm Greg Johnson. I'm the president and CEO of GJP International, which is Greg Johnson Partnerships International. And here in New York, I have the great privilege of serving as the chief advisor to the CEO of Emblem Health for family caregiving. I want to welcome you once again to this program. I always look forward to our Friday conversations, and I want to thank you because so many of you have written to me in very kind ways, thanking me for going back and doing this, as it were, Caregiving 101. And by that, I don't mean to suggest that if you've been caregiving, you don't want to be listening, because I frankly have learned a great deal just by going back and reviewing, to share, and to look back at the journey that we've had, because we can learn so much from it. We can make changes, we can be inspired by it. And we can also feel very grateful for the entire experience. So, what I have been doing in the new year is, first of all, we talked about caregiving in a general sense. Secondly, we talked about that famous three-legged stool of healthcare: the care recipient, the professional caregiver, and the family caregiver. And that stool needs all three legs. But we are focusing on the third, often the silent patients, because for so long people did not pay attention to that third leg: you and me, the by and large unpaid family caregiver. And so that has been the focus of my life and my ministry. And I'm ever so grateful to Emblem Health for all the programming, for all the outreach, and for their continued passion for family caregiving. Because as we look at the family caregiver, we also empower the professional caregiver, because the professional caregiver also has the role of the family caregiver very often. And particularly those of you who are professional caregivers, in whatever sense that may be, you know what it's like. The family all comes to you. The people, oh, he's in healthcare. Oh, she's a nurse. Go to them. So you come home from that professional consideration of the day, and suddenly you're swamped with more requests. They probably have called you at work as well. That's how it is. So, remembering all of these roles, and as I have certainly been, being the care recipient, we reevaluate. And this morning, I'm going to be sharing, as we conclude the broadcast, some of my journey in the things I did physically to deal with the surgery that was mine, because I think there's some things there that may be of help to you. So we talked first about family caregiving, then we looked at the two words that describe us: family, caregiver. And we looked at families of origin and families of choice. That was 2 weeks ago. Then last week, we looked at the many faces of family caregiving. And I was thrilled that so many of you wrote saying, I had no idea about that, because the predominant thought is, when we say family caregiver, you're thinking about old people like me. I'm still not old, that's 90 and up. So I've got ways to go. But there are many faces, and it's when we recognize all the faces that we can honor any particular situation that we might know. Now, we might know that someone is caring for a senior, but we didn't know they were also caring for a child or a spouse with a chronic condition. All of the possibilities, which only adds to the pressures. And what are the pressures on all of us? They are physical, emotional, and spiritual. And so for the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at each one of them: body, mind, and spirit. And today, we're going to begin with the body, the physical. Now, of course, when we start with that, what are the two words that you always hear? Diet and exercise. Now, I hate both of those words. So in my life, I've always said moderation and movement. That somehow helps me to get into it without going overboard on the others, because I have found it interesting in my life that no matter what the illness has been for me or for people for whom I'm caring. We go to the wonderful medical professionals, the emotional psychiatrists, and so forth, and they recommend medications, they recommend tests that need to be taken, all the wonderful, wonderful things that are out there. But at the end of the conversation, what do we talk about? What we're eating and exercise, keeping the body moving. And that's certainly been true for me as I'm learning to get that right hip working with the left polio leg. It's been quite a journey and it still remains that, but it's what it's about. So we need to accept that moderation and movement, diet and exercise are very important. And as family caregivers, we're also setting a role. And I want to suggest to you that as we're talking about body, mind, and spirit, we're talking about the caregiver, yes, but we're also talking about the care recipient. Because as we as caregivers are doing things for them, we need to remember to do them for ourselves. Why? Because before I can care for you, I've got to care for myself. And we inspire, even if they get upset. We do inspire and we do help the care recipient by allowing them to see what we are doing. As we look at our diet, we discuss diet with them. Maybe there's a diet that the care recipient is on that would work for you as well, with perhaps a few adjustments for your specific needs. But it becomes something that you can do together. The same thing goes with the exercises. I began after the surgery very much doing just some isometrics, being very limited, just walking, obeying my doctor. But I would do a bit of isometrics. Then, as I would sit at the computer, I also began to do things like this. This did not bother my hip at all, and it got my body working. Well, those are things that we can do, and we can feel happy about it because it's giving energy, it's keeping the blood flowing, and we feel more energized. Now, one thing that I like to suggest, and we are very blessed at Emblem Health, one of the families of companies that belongs to Emblem Health is an organization, my medical home, as it were, Advantage Care Physicians. And one of the gifts of this is when I'm dealing with my late husband, for example, I was able to book appointments for both of us at the same day, the same time, so that we could get to the doctor, but accomplish my needs medically and my checkups and my shots and medications, while we were also looking at those that were necessary for Joe. So I urge you, if your care recipient, particularly, is someone, a spouse, a partner in life, consider when you go to the doctor, don't just go for him or for her, but go together so that you can maximize your time and be certain that you are both being kept in the loop and you are both being taken care of. And yes, discuss with your primary care doctor, discuss with each of the physicians that you might be dealing with, the specialists. Let them know that you are in partnership. You are the caregiver. It's very, very important. Another thing that I get asked a great deal, and I'm going to say it right here on air, there is nothing wrong, ladies and gentlemen, in when you are at an appointment. If you feel, and it is not a negative statement, because the doctors, the physicians, and so forth are very pressured on time and that sort of thing. But if you feel that they're spending their life looking at the computer, I have been known to say, when you finish typing, we will continue this conversation. I want to look at you eye to eye. Now, it shakes them up. Yes, it does. But you have that right. You have the right for their attention. And secondly, you have the right, and I encourage you to do it, to, if they say something to you, feel free to, as it were, mimic it back to them, to be certain that you've got it. And whatever words you don't understand, say, can you explain that to me? I'm doing that all the time. That I don't understand. What do you mean by that? Because medical people, and I love them dearly, can get into their own world of vocabulary. And they paid a lot of money to learn all of those words. But I didn't. And I want to know what they really mean by it so that I can go home and do the things that are going to improve my health. And so I urge you on both of those. You will not be ever disciplined for that. You will not be treated poorly. And if you are, then you need to be looking for a far better primary caregiver, primary doctor, because you need to feel that you are heard and that you are listened to. That's one of the great joys of Advantage Care physicians. They are dedicated to listening and responding. And so I'm very, very grateful. And I say thank you publicly to you. Now, also physical, and these are all things that are physical that we have to do when we're caregiving. Keep a list. Now, whether you do it on your smartphone, I look like I know what I'm talking about, or you do it like I do on a piece of paper. Keep notes. This question you want to ask, that question you want to ask. Because if you're like me, I can get in the doctor's office and I'll feel fine. It's like going to the dentist. You're feeling terrible. You get to the dentist's office and you feel fine. That's the body. That's the how. What can I tell you? But if we write it down, it's not going to mean you're going to be miserably ill, but making a note of it gives you the opportunity to be certain that the question is asked. Because otherwise you get home and say, oh, I meant to ask. Well, you don't pick up the phone and call. That becomes very, very difficult because what happens? It's push this button, push that button. But while you are there, feel free. And the best way for me is to simply say, let me take a look and make sure I've asked you all the questions. Another thing that I urge caregivers to do, and some of it you might like to do even with the care recipient. I did that on one occasion. And that is to journal together. Why do I say journal? Because when we write out, we get it out from here, and that's going to be more of the mind next week. But we take the committee that's up here. We take the confusion. We take the fear often by writing it down, journaling what we're experiencing. And it adds to something that we're going to talk about the next 2 weeks because it's key to living, in my opinion. That's our gratitude list. Let's just put down 5 things we're grateful for today. 2 things we're grateful for today. Oh, instead of, oh, woe is me, woe is me. No. Today we're together. Today we saw a beautiful sunrise. All the various things, and it can be very, very simple things. This morning we had coffee, and oh, it was so good. Those things for which we're grateful. As many of you know, as a member of AA, I have a 33-year list in my Bible right next to my bed. Begins with some very simple things, but it's grown, and I often put on that gratitude list every broadcast I do. Not for the sake of, oh, look what I did, but thank you, God, that recovery came in my life, and I'm able to share, and I pray, help someone through today. So I urge you to consider each of those. Now, also in a physical sense, I want you to be aware that one of the things that often happens, and I know many of you have experienced it, is the increased isolation that comes with being a family caregiver. You don't get out. You don't get to go and do other things that had been part of your life. Your focus becomes very much that care recipient. And the care recipient can become very demanding more and more as fear comes into their lives. So it's something that you can and need to talk about. Yes, you can talk about it with the care recipient. I need to go for a walk. I will be back in a half hour. I'm going to make a couple of phone calls. I need to see how so and so is. I want to check in on them. Now, that sounds like more caregiving, and in a sense, it is. But what it is also doing is it's reaching out, it's broadening the circle. And no matter how ill someone is, I have long been a proponent of helping people who are care recipients to perhaps have one or two people who every week they make a phone call to because they can, as long as I have breath, I pray that I will be a caregiver to someone else, that I will help them through their day. And you know what happens when you do? As you help someone else, so are you helped. So I urge you to be aware of that. Another thing that is a favorite of mine, and of course, any of you who have been blessed to be in the 12 steps know exactly where these three C's are coming from. But they are something that a family caregiver needs to remember. You didn't cause whatever the issue may be. Number two, you can't control it. Remember, we are caregivers, not cure givers. And three, you can't cure it. So you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure. But you can care. And what does care mean? It means being present as things are today. And what does that mean? Acceptance. This is how it is today. It's not how it was yesterday, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I am simply dealing in this present. And as one of my favorite mentors often said, and at this moment, our hair's not on fire, so we're okay. I often, when I can get stressed, will think about that, and I'll be grateful for what hair I have left. But it's a very important phrase for us to remember those three C's of Al-Anon, frankly. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. But you can care for yourself and therefore be able to be present for whatever the circumstances might be. Now, there are two wonderful resources that I want to share with you. Both of them are listed at length in Care for the Family Caregiver, A Place to Start. This is the booklet that I have the privilege of writing with the late Gail Gibson Hunt from the National Alliance of Caregiving many years ago. This is the fourth edition of it. And it is filled with information. It is exactly what it says because there was no book like it. And frankly, there still isn't one that anybody was willing to be so basic. But it was important. We can't start with class 201. We need 101. Care for the family caregiver. A place to start because that's where most of us find ourselves. We didn't go to school to learn to be a caregiver. We may have had some wonderful examples in our lives, but we never looked at it as something that would impact us and something that we would be doing, and certainly as intently as we are. Now, there are two organizations that I have listed in there. There are several, but two that I would like to share. One is United Hospital Fund. You can go on and Google it, United Hospital Fund, a program entitled Next Step in Care. And that deals, number one, with all the transitions: home to hospital, hospital to rehab, rehab to hospital, hospital back to home, all of the transitions in care. And why is that important? Because also they have a fabulous set of dictionary for us, because words have different meanings in different settings. For example, many of you may not be aware, but most hospitals are at least two hospitals in one. There's the emergency room, where there is an entire protocol, an entire staffing, and entire titles for the people and for what those jobs require. When a person goes from the emergency room to the and is admitted to the main hospital, Suddenly, it's another cast of characters. And I use that word lovingly, but it's the best one to use because many of the titles are the same, but what they're doing is quite different. So we need to be comfortable. And Next Step in Care has provided some wonderful, wonderful information for you to help you navigate to whom you're talking and what that really means in the setting that you're dealing with. And transitions are extremely important. That's number one. And number two is Sheila Warnock's fabulous book, Share the Care, because it will give you, as the caregiver, some wonderful, wonderful opportunities to find people who can help you, find resources. And Share the Care is based upon not the care recipient and not the caregiver, but it is someone whom either or both of you know, whom you can involve setting up a team, and it's completely scripted. Everything is there for you to do. There is, and that's the whole purpose of Share the Care, so that you never need to ask for help again. I can't urge that enough. Now, I told you I was going to end the program this morning by sharing a bit of my recent journey. In October, in middle of October, I had a right hip replacement. And so it involved my primary care doctor. It was the orthopedic doctor. It was my cardiologist, who really was the key person. And so this was the book I created, Hip Operation October 19th. Why did I do this? Because I'm not wonderful on computer, and I'm worse finding it on my phone. So I needed to put together these items, and I made copies of them. I had several copies of all of them, but I had this with me when I went to the hospital. Now, before I mention that, I want to say that for many years, ever since Joe, I learned this when Joe was coming toward the end of his life. There has always been, and there remains, in my front closet, now just one, but there used to be two go bags. And mine simply says Greg Hospital. And in that bag are toiletries, a blanket, a shawl, because I'm always cold, a pajama top, some slippers, some face cream, some other items that are personal that I would want to have. And they are there ready to go. But also within it are all the documents that would be needed checking in, as well as a current listing, which I update regularly, of my medications, who is the doctor, and what is the dosage. So in this booklet, it began with a listing of medications, the morning, the night, as well as those over-the-counter sorts of vitamins and that sort of thing. I made extra copies of it. The idea is we're not trying to hide anything. I also prepared a list for all of the doctors. Now, this they were quite surprised at, but I sent an email to the primary care, to the orthopedic doctor, and to the cardiologist, introducing them to one another, giving their emails and giving their phone numbers, as well as their staff people, so that they all knew how to be in touch with each other. What else did I put in here? I had all of the letters that approved my surgery by Emblem Health. This was the approval for the surgery. This is what was to happen, and I had that with me. I trust all of them, but sounds like a little bit of former President Reagan, trust but verify. I want to make sure they're there. Now, what documents did I have? And here again, we come to something that is extremely important, not only for your care recipient, but for you. Anything I'm saying on this, it's about you, the caregiver, as well as the care recipient, because you need this sort of thing. What did I have? I had the living will of Gregory Johnson. I had that. I had the healthcare proxy. Therefore, they had that immediately. What else did I have? I had the HIPAA release authorization. Now, what does HIPAA release authorization? It means to whom do I allow the hospital to talk about my condition? Well, in this case, it happens to be my husband, Donnie, as well as two persons who have been extremely important in my life, and both who come from a very long, distinguished background in the medical field. And all three of them are listed. I have signed it, and the lawyers have taken care of that. Now, why do I carry that with me? Because I don't want to be there the morning of a surgery or something at 3 a.m. or 5 a.m. filling out papers and say, oh, I forgot to do this one or I forgot to do that. No, it's been done ahead of time. Now, if you aren't certain what documents, they're all listed here, along with some others that you need in life. And there's a whole section on that. But I wanted to go over these with you because I found it very helpful. When I got to the hospital, they were quite overwhelmed. I simply handed them the book. I said, everything is in here. And they simply took the healthcare proxy, the living will, the HIPAA. They made copies of it. They made copies of the medications. And they were able to scan that all into my file so that they had it electronically in the way that was most important to them. So, from a very practical point of view, and then when I returned, I updated everything that had gone on, and I added to it the aftercare plan. That was equally important for me to look at so I could remember. And I refilled any of the items that I used in the go bag, as well as going through it and saying, well, I really didn't need this, or I had three of this, that was ridiculous. Underwear, all those sorts of things. I'm a very practical person, but you want to be comfortable. And the morning of is much too late to be doing that. So now this has probably been one of the most practical of conversations that we've ever had. And I hope it's stimulated you to consider some things, to take some actions, to take a look at how prepared are you, and to increase and improve your journey as a family caregiver. I can't thank you enough for being with me. Now, please remember at any time you can contact me by email is the easiest. It's Greg Johnson at gjp-international.com. Greg Johnson at gjp-international.com. I'll be delighted to return and to respond and to read your message. I would love to hear about your caregiving story. I always do that. And feel free to be in touch. And on Sunday night, be with us for Caring for Me, Caring for You, a thought for the week. For now, I want to thank you for being with me this morning. And as always, we say onward in love and caregiving. Namaste. God bless and thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share this. I hope it's helped you. Take care. God bless.